Kale has become almost a cliché of healthy eating, providing 684% of your daily vitamin K, 206% of vitamin A, and 134% of vitamin C per cup raw. These numbers are genuinely impressive. Kale also contains vitamin E and various B vitamins, plus cancer protective compounds as a cruciferous vegetable. It's objectively nutritious. But let's talk about what often goes unmentioned. Kale has a strong, somewhat bitter taste that many people find unpleasant. The document suggests massaging raw kale with olive oil and lemon to break down fibers, which does help with texture and digestibility. However, this massage your kale advice has become something of a joke in wellness circles, emblematic of food trends that feel performative rather than practical. The recommendation to include kale 3 to 4 times weekly is ambitious. For people who genuinely enjoy kale, great. For those who don't, this feels like an obligation rather than a pleasure. The suggestion that baby kale is milder and good for introducing kale to skeptics reveals an underlying assumption that everyone should eat kale, and if they don't like it, they just haven't tried the right variety or preparation method. Kale chips, made by baking kale with olive oil and sea salt, are offered as a solution. These can indeed be delicious, but they're also easy to burn, which makes them bitter and unpalatable. The skill required to make successful kale chips is understated. The vitamin K content of 684% daily value raises the same concern mentioned with spinach. People on blood thinners need consistent vitamin K intake. The document mentions this, which is good, but it bears repeating. If you're on warfarin or similar medications, suddenly eating kale daily could interfere with your medication's effectiveness. Here's something important. Kale is part of the cruciferous family, and like other members of this family, it contains goitrogens, compounds that can interfere with thyroid function when consumed in very large amounts, particularly raw. For most people with healthy thyroid function, this isn't a concern. But for people with hypothyroidism or other thyroid conditions, eating massive amounts of raw kale could potentially be problematic. Cooking largely deactivates goitrogens, which is why the advice to include both raw and cooked preparations makes sense. The suggestion to remove tough stems is practical, though some people do eat the stems if they're chopped finely or cooked longer. The zero-waste approach of saving stems for vegetable stock is environmentally conscious, but requires extra time and planning. Lacinato kale, also called dinosaur kale or Tuscan kale, is described as slightly more tender than curly kale. This is accurate, and for people who find curly kale too tough, lacinato is a better option. But it's also often more expensive and less widely available. The assertion that the slight bitterness indicates beneficial compounds, embrace it rather than masking with excessive sweeteners, is philosophically interesting, but practically questionable. Yes, bitter compounds in vegetables often have health benefits. But telling people to embrace bitterness when their palates have been shaped by a lifetime of sweet and salty processed foods is unrealistic. Taste preferences are complex and influenced by genetics, culture, and experience. Kale stores well refrigerated, especially when kept in containers with paper towels to absorb excess moisture. This is useful advice for reducing food waste. What troubles me about the kale narrative is how it's become a symbol of virtuous eating, often in ways that feel judgmental toward people who don't enjoy it or can't afford it. In some areas, kale is expensive, particularly organic kale. The emphasis on choosing organic for leafy greens because they can concentrate pesticides is valid from a health perspective but adds financial burden. Kale is nutritious, no question. But it's not irreplaceable. Spinach, chard, collard greens, and other leafy greens offer similar nutrients. The fixation on kale specifically sometimes feels more about food trends than about actual nutritional superiority.